Hey everyone, welcome to Wonders of the First. I'm Jeff French and I'm the founder, but I am very much not the guy in the seat that is building the game. That person, as I hope a lot of you are starting to learn, is Brian Tinsman. Brian has a very, really long and esteemed resume in the CCG space, published author. Many people out in the space credit Brian with being their inspiration in the space. Somebody like Gavin Verhey, principal magic designer, going on Twitter and saying that Brian's name still echoes in the halls of Wizards as a legend after he had previously cited one of Brian's books for getting him into tabletop, the wildly successful Lorcana game. You know, the two head devs on that coming in through Brian's team back when he was at Wizards. You know, he's the guy that's done 8 Magic sets. So all that resume is there. But there's some other things too that I just wanted to kind of let you all know, because I didn't really think it comes through great in the resume. Brian is he's a very humble guy. He moves with intentionality and purpose. When we're in group meetings, Brian is the guy that will listen, and then when he speaks, his words come with a lot of gravitas. He is incredibly well respected for everyone that's around him and is able to kind of see that. He is not afraid of being challenged. It doesn't matter how junior you are on the team, you have a voice to challenge. He will hear you. Sometimes he may agree with you and sometimes he won't, but he's just that type of person. And then, you know, you look at something like this, something that you're building. I mean, this is, look, let's be honest. I mean, I count myself as a nerd. I'm no shame in it. This is a nerdy thing. And when you look at that side of it, Brian is on another level. He's what's known as a 999. I don't know if any of you are, if you're not familiar with that. Essentially, it's folks that have a certified IQ higher than 99.9% of the population. So if you think about the Mensa society, which a lot of us may be familiar with, 999 is kind of the Mensas of the Mensas. It's like that whole nother level up in your IQ and just how smart you are. And that to even get into that, you have to like proctor the test under like a licensed professional. So you can't like take it online or anything. It's a really high standard, and none of that makes it that Wonders is going to be successful. Absolutely not. But what it does is it says that we have the right person in the seat. And I hope that after watching this, you'll believe that we have the right person in the seat. And then there's a lot of other people in a lot of other seats that it will take to make Wonders of the First a big success. But everyone needs to understand that the game itself, that is the straw that stirs the drink. No one's role in that is more important than Brian's. He's critically important, but he's also incredibly brilliant, incredibly gifted, has the resume to back it up. And beyond just the resume, the true experience. You know, that's just the amount of hours, the whole 10,000 hours to be an expert at something. I would shudder to think how many hours Brian has in game development. I wouldn't even begin to be able to estimate it, but it's way more than 10,000. So that's the type of person we have in the seat. I look forward for you to get to meet my friend Brian Tinsman and learn a little bit more about him. So let's jump in and pick up that interview. All right, everyone. Welcome back to Wonders of the First. I am the founder of the company, Jeff French, and I've got with me here today someone who I am super excited to let you all get to know a little bit better, and that is Brian Tinsman. Brian, welcome. How are things for you out in Texas today?
Doing awesome. Having a great time working on this game.
Good. So what is that guy that's about to eat you back there? Like, what the heck is that thing, man?
It's a full-size Allosaurus skull. So
that's crazy. I cannot even imagine. Like, that's crazy. Something like
yeah,
that.
I'm a fossil hunter in some of my other hobbies.
Really? I literally just learned that here live as we go. What's the coolest thing you've ever found?
Baseball-sized snail shells from 90 million years ago. They have them actually. Central Texas is a super great place to look. So
really,
yeah, you can find nautiloid type shells just like sitting in the bottom of a creek bed.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Have you ever found anything like a T-Rex tooth or any of that kind of stuff? Do y'all have those down in Texas, or like just?
Yeah, I haven't seen any, but there's just like huge fossil oyster beds like within walking distance of my house, and you can just go out there and just kind of like dig around and find weird stuff.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's jump into a couple of things here. Let's maybe just like start by let's take it back. How did you find yourself into tabletop and game development? Like how does that go? How do you go from I know what your background is. Feel free to share as much as you want about college days and that sort of thing. But how do you go from that to then into game design? How does that work?
So I was in business school at the University of Washington, and I was a high creative output person. Sometimes I talk about like game designer's curse, where you can't stop thinking about your creative output. And so uh, I was just like naturally on my own designing magic cards. And this is in the era of 1996, 97. And I just did some free projects for Wizards at the time, and they said, "We need you. Come and build out our marketing research department." So I came on board in market research and built out a whole program for them to have players come in and test out their learn to play materials. This is like in the early days of Pokemon also. So people would come and open up a box of Pokemon and try to like read the rules and understand deck building, understand the formats. And so we just like had to keep iterating on that. I had 250 hours logged behind the one-way glass. And that is like a super amazingly great experience for an early stage game designer to have, because you'll see the way that people engage with these games. They'll read something out loud, but it won't register in their mind. And they'll say, draw a hand of 7 cards. And then they'll like have the deck right in front of them. And they'll say, draw from where? Do I just pick? Like they won't get it. And so like having that in mind helps you a lot when you start to like build the user experience. In game design, there's a whole facet people probably know called UX, right? User experience, which is not just the tutorial. It's not just the user interface, but it's the whole process of a user, a player coming down, sitting for the first time, trying to understand, are they having fun in the first few moments of the game? So I like laid the foundation of all the game design work that I did moving forward. And it ended up being like really great for my career.
That's definitely an awesome way to start. Being the guy to hang the one way glass is kind of how I've described it, which you didn't you metaphorically did, even though you didn't necessarily hammer the nails and stuff. You were the guy there doing it. And I remember at our first play test for Wonders of the First, there was you mentioned that to me, that you've watched a lot of game play testing, a lot of first time encounters with the cards, and I remember you telling me, you said this is going amazingly well. The fact that people are sticking in, the types of questions they have were the ones that you wanted them to have versus the ones that would be negative, the quest for exploration and that sort of thing. So, and I actually cut a video about the playtest and said that you had that experience. We could circle back to that, talk a little bit more, but that was a really interesting point to me about your observation of the playtest. So take me from there. So like you come in, you help build this market research group. You're looking through the one way glass, you're seeing all that, and then like take us from there to creating your first set. Like what did that look like?
So I was excited about games, and I just had kind of this need for creative output, and I had all kinds of great ideas about the kinds of CCG sets that I would like to play, and I would just build them and play them for myself, and write them in a spreadsheet, and just with myself or my friends tinker around with them. And so I realized at one point that I should start showing this to the people I know, because I started to develop good relationships with the Magic R&D people and Pokemon R&D people who came to all of those user playtest sessions, and telling them about my ideas. And then, here's a file that I made of 300 Magic cards, handed it to the head of Magic R&D. And the first time I ever did that, I kind of got a brush off, like, yeah, we're not really looking for new sets, or right now this doesn't really fit our product lineup. And I pushed back and I said, okay, well, tell me why, tell me how, tell me what I can do better next time. And that made a huge difference. I think I earned some respect from doing that. And also, like a couple of days later, I got my paper. This was like a printout that I just handed to him. I got my paper back with all kinds of red pen marks on it, criticism. And I studied that and learned exactly. Oh, okay. You need so many of a low cost, in common for draft format. A lot of that is more common knowledge to CCG players of today because there've been so many articles and discussions and
Right.
great, YouTube videos about the approach to game design. But for me at the time, I poured a ton of energy into that and kept submitting new sets, new ideas. I was the first person at the company ever to submit a concept for Egyptian mythology themed set. So, sooner or later that became reality.
There you go.
Later, much
Yep.
later. But so the first set, at some point they said this guy's relentless, but just bring him onto a team. And I was put onto Judgment just to try me out. And the design team for the Judgment set was me, the head of Magic R&D, Mark Rosewater, and Richard Garfield. So it was like the three most important people in maybe still in Magic history. The head of Magic R&D at the time was Bill Rose, and as we did design work on that set, the three of them each got pulled into other projects, kind of one at a time for various reasons. And they had enough confidence in me just from a short time working with me that they said, why don't you go ahead and lead the set and we'll all just contribute to your lead. And I was kind of staggered, like,
Yeah, that's a very
okay.
strong, tremendous vote of confidence there early on.
Yeah, right. That tells me I was doing well, I guess.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure.
I don't think that kind of opportunity to get to the top of a premier project is available so much these days anymore. But I did have really, really experienced people on the set with me, and if I was messing up, they would easily be able to step in and fix things. So I
Right.
know it wasn't like a crazy risky thing for them to hand it to me.
Yeah, that's really awesome, man. And one thing too, for anyone that's listening, I would like us, because a lot of times we have so much recency bias in how we see the world. But just remember, this is back in an era where we were using the internet at the time, using Gopher FTP servers, right? We didn't really have. I mean, you're talking like the earliest days of visual web browsing. Like, there was no social media, there was no YouTube, there was no dissemination of this. If you wanted to create a video about playing the game Magic the Gathering, you were cutting that thing to a VHS tape, or I'm not really sure when DVD technology came along. But I mean, this is early stuff that Brian's talking about when he was back there doing that in an era where you truly had to cut your teeth by learning. Like, Brian, like, so what were the resources you were able to use at that time? That's because you've written several books since, and we want to talk about Wonders, so I don't want to get too stuck up on all this. So we won't go into all the books and stuff, but if anybody wants to look into that, Brian, multi-published author around game design and that sort of thing. I know Gavin Verhey, who is a principal Magic designer, has quoted that book as being an inspiration for him, which is awesome. Like, so Brian's done all that, but like, what were your resources? Was it really just roll up your sleeves and go, or what did you have back in that era?
So a lot of it was they had very talented staff, and I got to be in discussions every day with all the original people from the early days of Magic, and they had a whole slew.
You
of
were there in the
CCGs.
early days. This is like in the 90s, man. You're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
but,
something that was 3 or
like
4 years old.
most of the people at that time were all the same people who had worked on those early products, and so I
Right.
got to absorb a lot of their knowledge and be mentored, and in fact much credit to Mark Rosewater, who's a wonderful friend of mine, for mentoring me and advocating for me, and taking me under his wing. In those days, there wasn't any other better resource that I could ask for.
Yeah, sure. Awesome. And Mark Rosewater is a guy he's a polarizing figure because he's out front, right? I mean, it's kind of like I end up being a polarizing figure. You'll probably become one the more out front you are too. Like, it's just, but the human beings behind a lot of this stuff is kind of what I always look to. And I've heard nothing but good things about Mark Rosewater as a human being. And he's a great game designer and I mean, obviously he can't stand the test of time that he has and not be. I mean, it's kind of lunacy to say that he's not.
Oh no, he's a fantastic genius level talent for sure, and a wonderful person. So,
Awesome.
I'll always be a fan.
Awesome.
Um,
Yeah, that's great.
but another part of my experience that a lot of even other designers didn't get at Wizards was I had an MBA, and so I was kind of like the R&D member that was trusted with understanding business management and finance and economics, and so uh, I had the job of concept acquisitions, which was a term that Hasbro used when Hasbro acquired Wizards, and handed that role down to them. So while I was working on CCG design, I was also looking at outside submissions for designers, well known, talented designers who would come and bring a game to us and say, "Hey, do you want to publish this game under Avalon Hill brand or Hasbro brand or something like that?" And so, as part of that, I would get to play many new, like not many new unpublished games every week, just to evaluate them and then write, you know, write an analysis of our evaluation of whether I thought could be a good fit for the company to, acquire the publishing rights to this. And that turned out to be just an amazing learning experience of all the stages that a new game design goes through, from early conception all the way to, getting acquired, getting published. And it was sort of like, I felt like there's a scene in Conan the Barbarian where they put him on like this, pushing this wheel around, and he starts out skinny, and then like a few years go by, and then like now he's Mr. Universe muscles. Like, that's having to play all of these games in good and bad states and evaluate them all gave me sort of that like grind the wheel until I got good at like looking at a game, understanding right away, is this
Right.
worth pursuing? Is this a good mechanic? Is it going to fit with players?
Right.
And there's not that many people at Hasbro or Wizards who were doing that role. And so many people, knowing that I had that experience, came and asked me, "Hey, how do I get my game idea published? Where what should I do to make my game better?" That I gave out so many pieces of advice that I just wrote a book about it and said, "Oh, here, read this.
That's
This has
awesome.
everything I would want to say." So that's
Yep.
kind of where the book idea came from.
Yeah, so I mean that just starts to give like those of you out there just a small taste of when we set out to do this, and I started looking for someone to partner with on this side. That why Brian stood out so well to me, and think whatever you want about me. One thing that have a pretty good track record for is identifying the right people for the right seat, and I do believe in the 10,000 hours to expertise concept, and so I knew that I needed that type of person in the seat, and then you go beyond that, and then we end up with someone as amazing as Brian. I've said it, and Brian, I know you're a very humble guy, but you're one of the most brilliant people that I've had the pleasure to be around. It's been nothing but a pleasure to work on this game with you, and I'm just so glad that you're on our team. Let's move in a little bit, if you don't mind, and let's talk about Wonders of the First. Maybe if we can, maybe just start with just a high level elevator pitch about what the game is, the general way the game functions, maybe who the game's built for, just in case we have some new folks that are really at the early exploratory phase. Maybe start there and just unpack a little bit of that, and then we can dive in a little deeper.
The most distinctive part of this game is the layout of conquering the realms. There's 7 realms, and every time you put a wonder on the board, wonders are our fighting units, it can battle for control of that realm. And if you control the realm, you get to take the stone. And so the victory condition is who has the most stones across this entire 7 realm battlefield at the end of the game. And that creates quite a different play dynamic from, many CCGs are more about damage your opponent and bring their life total down to 0. That's great. There's tons of design space there. But you can do a game that is focused on this sort of tactical decisions in the play space, but then also uses a lot of the familiar mechanics from other CCGs, TCGs, in a way that makes it accessible to to CCG fans.
Right.
So
So people that are familiar with CCGs, they're going to come in, and a lot of the core mechanics on the cards and that sort of thing. A lot of them they're gonna have familiarity with the general idea, and then others they're going to know how to go to the rule set and find them. Is that kind of a fair assessment of how to say that, Brian, to dumb it down a little bit for the smooth brains like myself?
yeah, for sure. And one of the principles that is discussed a lot on game design forums and this something that came a lot from Zynga was there's an innovator's paradox, right? If you're too innovative, then people don't understand your product and it's hard for them to connect with and learn how to play it. If it's too familiar, it's just a knockoff. I've seen this a million times before. So
Right.
the balance between that is generally for a really commercially successful and fan favorite sweet spot is 1/3 familiar, 1/3 new and different, and then in the middle is 1/3 a twist on familiar mechanics.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're aiming for here, right? We have a really interesting and different victory uh, condition that you don't see a lot. And we have quite simple and straightforward battle mechanics. And then we have a lot of card abilities that you've seen before, and you'll understand how to use right away. Um, that makes it easy to come in and start playing and have a good time quickly.
Right. And so, Brian, like, I hope that, obviously we have an approach of radical transparency. So one of the things that I always try to do is not to pretend that I'm something that I'm not. And I don't even pretend to be anywhere near the caliber of understanding in game mechanics and that sort of thing, of how to design and that sort of thing. So as we were going through the development here, again, it does go back to trusting the person that's in the seat, trusting the team that we put around you, which I have. But I'm a human being too, and there's always just a little bit of doubt in your mind. If people are telling me, Jeff, the game's fun, or new people that have played, I'm like, hey, what'd you think? They're like, yeah, it's fun, and I'm always sitting there thinking to myself, like, would you tell me if it wasn't fun, if it really wasn't? But man, when we went into that first public play test, we walked all those people in the door that morning, we sat them down. 30 minutes go by, an hour goes by, 2 hours go by, the smiles, the excitement. That's where it really landed for me, that this could be something really, really, really special. And I guess, where were you at that phase? Obviously, you had full belief in it. I think for you, it was more validation than it was for me. Like, for me, it was probably a little bit more of a realization. But like, when did you in this process begin? Was there a moment where you said, I think we have a really potentially amazing game here that could really break paradigms and do some amazing stuff? When did that click for you? How far along in the process?
Um, I feel so. You don't know anything until you get outside players playing it, and even if you get your friends to play a new design, they very often don't want to hurt your feelings and they say nice things. But if
Yep.
you get people who don't know you and you walk up and they don't even know that you worked on it, and you see them genuinely having a good time and getting right into it without a lot of learning and difficulty and discussion. It's super auspicious. Uh, I try not to make predictions about how good or bad a game is going to be before the rubber meets the road there, and kind of take a stochastic approach. Some game designs are going to be a hit right away, and some are going to need a lot of development. Typically, what will happen is you'll have some good feedback and some bad, some problems, and then you got to fix it and you got to iterate. And then after several iterations and improving the product, you get to a place where you're like, yeah, I feel really good about this now that we've addressed all these things. But we kind of leapfrogged a whole bunch of those stages in when we brought it to new players, and they started asking questions about new card abilities that they could imagine, and what if this and what if that. And they skipped over all of those feedback problems. Not all of them. We had some really great
Sure.
constructive feedback, but in general, people were excited about the internal strategy space of the game and not an external view of the game to criticize things that could be changed about the rules engine.
Right.
And you don't see that very often. It's wonderful. It's really lucky when you see that so early.
Right. And so another thing in the game that you kind of have been a champion for all along is a nice, big, robust set. And we have over 400 cards coming out in our initial release, our existent set, and I know that was something that was important to you. What does having 400 cards in a set, 400 or more cards, what does that? Why does that matter? What does it do? What's the difference in a 180 card set? I think Lorcana was like 100. 90 maybe, plus those enchanted that were off the chart. I can't remember, but it's like, what's the difference? What does that do for you? And again, I don't mention their name in order to suggest it's not a great game. I'm just saying that there's a difference. It's in size. That's the only point I'm making. So don't want anybody to clip me on social media and say that Jeff said anything negative. That's not what I'm saying.
So part of the answer to that, I want to back up and talk about the early stages of the IP development. The way this game was developed was before a CCG rules engine was even put together. There were 5,000 characters with art and names and story text. And when we came in and created the game engine, we knew that we would need to pull those characters to create the wonders cards, the items card, the land cards, the spell cards. And you would normally never do that. Like a big established publisher would never do it that way, because you want to have the IP be at the service of the card abilities. So normally you have the game designers that are just playtesting with blank cards with placeholder names. Then they hand it off to a creative team. And then the creative team says, okay, here's the name. We're going to commission an art piece. So we did it backwards, and it was kind of weird and kind of wonderful. When we had a card ability, we had to search through this list of 5,000 characters and find one that could fit. And then when we found one that was just awesome and we knew we wanted to have it in there, we would adjust the card abilities a little bit to match up better with that character. And because we did it that way, you have sort of a blend of like top down and bottom up, right? Bottom up is you create the abilities and then you find a character or IP fit to match it. And then top down would be you have a character or a story, and then you create abilities to match it. But we have both of those happening at once, and it gives the card set a lot of character and personality. But because we were pulling from that large set of characters, we weren't bottlenecked in the number of cards that we could do. We were only bottlenecked by the number of abilities and the complexity and the interactions that we wanted to put into a single set. And we ended up with a really huge set, which is fantastic, because suddenly you have way more deck building options, way more strategic variation than you would have like in a typical early set release. Would be something like 200 cards, 250. Magic Beta was like 290 something, right? And that's still the size of a large
Typical. Yep.
Magic expansion. And we're coming in north of 400, which means we kind of like get to jump to the strategic complexity and depth that you would have after two releases, or an expansion or two.
Yep.
Plus, let me talk a little bit about the nested set principle. So we set out to say that we want to have a set within a set, a game within a game, so that if you want to just play with commons, uncommons, and rares, you will have a ton of strategic depth, a ton of good complexity. And so we have, if you want to just play the format of the lower commonalities, you can just play that format and you don't have to worry about the higher collectability cards to build your deck. And we did that intentionally, and still working on it, still developing it. Our commons, uncommons, and rares tiers together add up to 90% of what a Magic beta set was. Um, so you have a very substantial CCG experience just with those easier to get cards, and we're doing that.
And Brian, can I make a quick point of order there for viewers to listen? It's like, so our rarity system is common, uncommon, rare, epic, mythic. So we have a 5 range. So you're talking about those bottom 3. Yes, the name is rare, but if those that are familiar, rares are not the rares. The rares are the mythics, and then the epics a little bit below that. So rares down, rare, uncommon, common. We expect those to be just massively accessible. Just wanted to make that point, Brian.
Yeah. Good clarification. I should mention that. So we haven't seen this intentionally done, and it's something that you really can do to put a set within a set. If you look for it and you try for it, and so what you got to do is take the kind of build around cards that are usually in the higher rarity tiers and put them into the middle rarity tiers. And you see this kind of thing, like popper formats are very popular, and there are certain cards that enable popper deck strategies, and we want to have a lot of those at like the uncommon slots, so that there really is like a very good variety of buildable decks in those lower rarity tiers.
Yeah, so this may be just a good point for us to maybe start going into a little bit of this. So for those that are coming in, we'll just go ahead and tell you that we have a controversial take that is built into what we are building, and it is our no reprint promise. And we have basically a constitution and bill of rights called the Wonders Way that's going to outline a lot of our core principles. Brian and I have actually been fine tuning the final pieces of that, and we're going to put it up for discussion maybe as early as this evening as I'm recording this. So it's probably will at least be up for discussion by the time we get this published. But we came into this, and if we just want to give the background of how this came to be, so that everyone knows, when I engaged with Brian, I told him, I said, I do have a dream of a CCG that could live without needing to reprint cards. And there's a lot of other content out there. That's not what this video is for, but just as a really high level, I believe that the collectability in a CCG is absolutely a feature, not a bug. I don't believe that every card should be easy to get. I believe that the chase of cards is one of the magical things that's in a CCG. Collectability never turns off. 24/7, it's always there. A lot of us, we may only get to play the game, other than solitaire, we may only get to play once or twice a month with our friends. Collectability is always there, and the sense of accomplishment that it gives you is amazing. I love collectability, and so that challenge did come from me. However, it's very important, and I want you to hear it from Brian himself as we're here on this interview. It was a challenge to Brian. It was not a mandate to Brian. It was no, hey, we're going to market this game and we're going to spin it that we're not going to reprint cards, but we're going to find all these cute ways to do it anyway. It was just an honest, genuine, this is something that I'd like to see exist in the world. Is it doable? And to take that one step deeper before I then turn it back to Brian, even me, as much as I love collecting, please understand that the game is the single biggest core of my thesis for everything I would collect in the CCG. Because I love to collect absolutely does not mean for an instant that I don't want the game to be just incredibly accessible, widely disseminated, everybody having amazing times with it. That is critical. The game is the straw that stirs the drink, and collectability is the killer feature that differentiates for me a CCG from a board game, from an LCG, living card game where the cards are just produced kind of you buy it, you get the whole set of cards and mix and match. It's got that unique feature in it that was part of the original vision from Garfield that had a lot of twists and turns to get to the reprint metas of today and that sort of thing. But I just want you to understand that's how it all came to be. It wasn't that we set out to do it from a marketing standpoint. It was something that it was a dream that I had, challenged one of the most brilliant minds that I've ever come across. And here we are. So, Brian, with that said, take people back. Like, what did you think when I asked you the question? When I said, Brian, can we make a game that we don't reprint cards? What was your initial thought when I said it?
So, look, there's pros and cons to having reprints or having no reprints in a CCG.
Hey,
And
no. Let's back up for a second. You got to tell people you think I was crazy. What did you think? Like, I want to give it to them, the raw, uncut. Like, when I said it, what was your first thought?
Yeah. Do I need to talk this guy out of this? What is he thinking here? And do I need to nod my head and then come back later and then lay out all the arguments against it? But the conventional wisdom is.
But you never felt that I was trying to pressure you to do it or any of that. It was just can we do it? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
no, dude, I'm like one of the very few CCG designers that probably would consider this. Let me tell you, in Magic R&D for years and years, I was told straight up that it will never be possible to do an on-draw trigger. And I worked on it and finally got miracles through the system. And look, they had some pros and cons, super successful. A lot of people totally loved them. A few people thought they were a pain in the ass. I think everybody was happy that we were able to enter into that design space. It's a similar thing. Like, if I was going by conventional wisdom, I would say there's huge problems with this idea. Why are we taking on these huge problems when we don't have to? And of course, after chewing on it some more, like I said, there's pros and cons. Is it possible to amplify the benefits of the pros, mitigate the drawbacks of the cons, and come out with a product that is sustainable with no reprints? And when we figured out an approach that is going to work, it was super goddamn exciting. And it made our design team kind of shake our heads and say, why isn't every game doing this? I mean, I know they have business reasons, but every game should be doing this, in my opinion.
That's bold. I like that. So, again, I believe very strongly in guardrails for creativity. It's a lot easier to create within certain boundaries than it is just this blank slate. And so we're moving along. We have the framework we have now for the game. We're trying to see, can we design for no reprints? And like, maybe unpack a little bit. I'm someone who's heard about the game. I say, okay, Tinsman, I like his old sets he's done. Cool. It sounds like he's a smart guy. I'm interested, but man, I can't quite get there. Like, what would you say to those people? And I'm a big believer in conviction, not convincing, but we do want to tell folks where we're coming from. Like, help me understand as a player why I should be okay to give this a shot. Like, what would you say to me? Specifically, no reprints, not just like, so assume I like the game as a whole. I'm ready to go, but my only last point is I'm just not really sure about this no reprint thing. I think that could be your undoing. You're going to be dead in 3 years.
Sure. So look, I'm a creative, but I also have a business background and I understand marketplace positioning. And there's going to always be a segment of CCG players who are more excited and more focused on having lots of accessible cards and don't really care that much about collecting. That's great. There's lots of products out there, but there's also some open space for a CCG that really protects the collector and really has mechanisms in place to do things like this kind of crazy sounding no reprint policy. And for the people who love and appreciate that, that's we want to be your heroes. And of course, gameplay is at the forefront. Having good games, um, great. Our game has amazing deck building. If you're a deck builder, it's like a deck builder's playground, in my opinion. It has very low deck building constraints. But let me cut to the chase here. Like, people who are watching this are probably like, okay, what are these ways to mitigate the no reprint policy? Like, let's be real about this. If you just straight up did a CCG and had no reprints, then people who got in early are going to have those cards, and the supply is limited. As the game grows, demand for those cards is going to go up. The prices are going to go sky high, and new players, or even those early players, are going to be priced out of the game. So we've got 3 ways to help lessen that. The first and most important one is our build point system. And so you can look at historically what other CCGs have done to try to lessen this problem, right? What they've done is they've created different formats, only use cards from the last 3 years, from the last 10 years. They don't really worry too much about specific card power, unless a card gets so environment warping that they just ban it outright. And in my opinion, that doesn't get you that far. It only constrains the sets, but not the cards themselves. And it fragments your audience. Like, do I have enough people to play, enough potential people with decks to play this older format versus this newer format? Do I always have to bring 10 decks with me wherever I go, just in case? With build points, every card gets a point value based on how powerful it is, how dominant it is. It's not printed on the card. It's in the card database on the website. Add up all the build points of all the cards in your deck, and you get a deck point total. And you can come and say, my deck is 500 points. That's a format. It's like a weight class in MMA or something like that, like 180 pounds and lower. And so 500 points and lower, I can easily match. My deck is 490 points. Yours is 480 points. We know it's going to be a good match. And players are already kind of trying to do this by saying, oh yeah, my deck is a 7 out of 10. Oh, mine's a 6 out of 10. It's subjective.
Yep.
And it
But
ends
players
up
each
in
defining that.
it ends up with like an incentive to kind of underplay what's a 6 out of 10, because then, and even if your deck is a 6 out of 10 and you just happen to get lucky and beat everybody quickly, they're all still going to think that you were lowballing, because
Sandbagging.
it's all subjective. Yeah.
We call that sandbagging.
Yeah, and one person's 6 out of 10 is not someone else's. But with a point system like this, you can know. And what that allows you to do also is have, instead of like these separate formats, you can have a continuum of formats, right? Your play group may like to have all their decks at 400 points and under, or if you want to play a more of a popper style format, and you don't want to use those really hard to get cards, you play 200 points and under formats, which is all going to be probably much easier to get cards. So it allows for tabletop matchmaking. And it also allows for tuning and adjusting of environments, because if a card is really environment warping and we don't want to see it that much, we don't ban it. We just slowly update over time its point value, so that if you're going to keep using that in your deck, you've got to put lower point value cards in there too. So the rest of your gets worse as this card remains, until either you find a way to make it work,
Right.
or you go up to the next weight category, or you say, all right, I don't want to play with that card anymore. I'll save that for my 5,000 point deck. And people who have those really old cards that are in high demand, sure, go into the unlimited category, 5,000 point deck. Somebody else will have a 5,000 point deck. That's great. Play those against each other.
Yeah, this is something too that it's if you stop and think, it's easy to understand how that concept works. We have it in fantasy sports. You have salary caps for roster construction, and then within your roster construction, what Brian is saying, we see that. Do you go studs and duds where you load up to the top end? You take Christian McCaffrey in football, you take Giannis in basketball, and then you have to put some duds on the other side of that. Then you do have the RNG element of your deck draws and that sort of thing that play into a CCG and in those different types of strategies. And sometimes you might crash and burn, and other times you might have a big time win. There's just a lot of different space there to explore that. But I don't think from a conceptual standpoint, many people are going to struggle with that idea, Brian.
Yeah. So there's a lot of devil in the details there about how often do we update values, and how much of a change do we make at any given time. But again, the fact that you can have an objective method of matchmaking decks puts kind of all that power in the player's hands to, if you want to use your super high powered cards that are not accessible anymore, that's great. You just got to have a fair match with somebody else who has cards of that power level too, which is, I think, what everyone wants, right? And so it lessens the impact of, I was in from day one, I have access to builds from 10,000 cards. You came in later, you only have access to 2,000 cards. So if we match up my collection versus your collection, bad matchup. But we can drill down now to, build a 300 point deck for each of us from our own collections. It'll be more of a fair matchup.
So deck score, I think that's one that as folks get into it, I think they're going to enjoy it from a collectability standpoint. We can create some more content around this. I love it, and I'll tell you some of the reasons why as we begin to unlock other content. But the idea of forming my thesis around power, there's an idea that there are certain cards that may be super popular that may be in a lot of decks that are lower powered, and if you get that in a rarer, say, first edition, or you get in a serialized card, I could make a thesis that those cards are going to be ones that collectors are going to fall in love with. And then you have the other side of that's just the whole, like, I want to collect power and big powerful cards, and there's that lane to run in as a collector as well. And then again, most of you that are watching this, you overlap as both, you're collector and player, and so we're really trying to make sure that duality is well cared for here. But the game is absolutely the dog that wags the tail. There's no mistaking that, but the dog has a lot better balance when that tail is up and functioning properly. So Brian, that was the first of your kind of your 3 points. What's the next one we want to talk about for specifics around how it's a sustainable no reprint policy?
Yeah. Before I go on to the second one more point about the build points. There's a lot of benefits. One of the other benefits is that whenever we adjust build point values, it creates an impetus to go back and retune decks. And so with a lot of games, it's only with a new card release that you have a reason to go back. I'll take some old cards out of my deck and put some of the new ones in. And so they're required to do, if they want the play formats to evolve and stay fresh and keep changing, they churn out a ton of new cards. That's great. I hope we get to churn out a ton of new cards too, but sure, we want to do a pace that is right for our fans and players and collectors. And so we are still able, whenever we adjust these build point values, we're still able to add a bunch of new deck building interest into the mix without having to make people buy the latest set in order to have new deck building and fresh environments, evolution of strategies.
Yep. Depth without complexity too, because you already understand the system, but it gives you another level of depth. And anytime you can add depth and not add complexity, that's almost always a win in anything that you're doing, because people love depth and they hate complexity.
Yeah. And so again, if you're a deck builder, it's an awesome challenge, because with new build point values coming out, you're probably some people are going to find the combinations or the build point assignments that the devs missed. You're going to find a new combination and get like some really strong strategy in your 400 point deck, and be the first one to kick people's butts with it. And then later on, when it's time to do another update, you will have had your time in the sun, but we don't want it to warp the environment and suppress other types of strategies. So we'll be able to tune that up and keep the environment fresh. Okay, so I could talk about that for a lot, but we talked about 3 major tools to mitigate the downsides of no reprints. So the first one was the build point system. The second one I touched on a bit already, which is the nested set within a set, so that if you want to collect and play just the commons, just the uncommons and commons, just the rares, uncommons and commons, which will of course be much easier to get, much more available, you're going to have a CCG experience that is comparable to other CCGs out there, just with those subsets. And we did it on purpose, and we made sure that there is plenty of deck building interest in those tiers. But if you want to go into the higher tiers, it gets even bigger than that. But you can opt in, opt out. Okay, so that's the second part. And then the third part is our formats and rules system. Now, of course, there are some formats that relieve pressure on having high price cards. So limited formats, of course, in draft, we're going to support those. Multiplayer formats also reduce pressure on having really high price cards in your deck, because if you sit down with $1,000 deck with busted cards, and then the other people at the table are have weaker decks, everybody's going to focus you, and you're going to get taken out as the biggest threat. And so those multiplayer formats, it's not a perfect solution, but there is a self-balancing factor, and it's a self-balancing factor that's being more and more relied upon these days. Like, you don't have to do as much card tuning and balancing if you know that these cards are going to be played in a 4-player game, and the play group is going to kind of police themselves, either by saying, don't play that card, it's not fair, we don't like it, or by saying, if you play that card, 3 people are going to gang up on you. Like, okay, that takes pressure off the developers to have to tune the set as much. So we are going to tune the set, but that's just an illustration of the fact that multiplayer games have somewhat of a pressure relief.
Sure.
The other thing is that our gameplay system, our rules engine, is somewhat resistant to unbalancing. So if you've seen some of the rules, you know that there's 7 rounds, and each round of the game, a new realm unlocks, and you can only play your cards in those unlocked realms. And the realms that are still locked, like, these are the victory conditions, right? The most out of 7 realms, and on turn 1, 6 of them are locked and cannot be affected by anything. And so if you have a really broken combo, and we totally miss, and you get some crazy dominant play on turn 1, all you can do is win that 1 realm. So you're 1 point out of 7 towards victory. And then again, the second realm unlocks, and the third. So there's only so much damage you can do. Like, you could draw a lot of cards, and you can get other types of advantages. But in terms of quick wins, snowballing, getting way ahead in the early game, the game system that we've built is somewhat naturally resistant to that. And we've had playtesting eras for a couple of months when we did have really broken recursion engines happening. But we found that they're highly tunable, highly mitigatable, and uh, we can identify them pretty clear. Anyways, so I'm taking a long time to say that crazy broken cards in other game systems are not as crazy and broken in this game system. And so therefore, again, that takes some pressure off of this card is so good, everybody needs it, it warps the format, you can't build a deck without it. That won't happen in our game system as much. So those are our three key points that convince me that, yeah, we can actually have a no reprint policy that's sustainable long term. It's going to last for years and decades to come. And like imagining 10 years in the future from now, there's cards that can be played and are good and in demand and go in decks, but they don't warp the format. They don't price other people out of it. They don't force new players to spend $10,000 if they want to start playing. We're going to get there.
I believe it 100%. And I think that that's something that I hope folks, when you look at it, it is different. It is a different approach. Yes, there may be some cards that everyone can't have. That is a feature, not a bug. But keeping it accessible so that people can come in, having formats, creating a game that we really believe the market's going to fall in love with, and then making sure that game is accessible regardless of your budget. This is not something that we're trying to build for the rich. That's not the point. Having a reliable framework of supply so that the market can deal with confidence, so that if you need to take a year or two off, you have a baby and you're busy, you're not sleeping, and you can't play your game. I've had these things in my life. The times where I haven't collected were generally around the births of my kids and then other kind of major events in my life. But when I came back to my sports card collections, if anything, most of them had gone up in value. You walk away from your CCG today and come back in 2 years and all your products are new, you're probably gonna come back to something that's not worth the paper it's printed on. And I think that's a bug. And it's a bug that we want to fix. And I think that we have the framework to do it. I think it's a game that's going to be wildly accessible. I think it's a game that's going to be wildly collectible. And what we're going to do for you is we're going to be as transparent as we can be. And we're going to be bold. We're not going to be afraid. The Wonders Way, you can read all about it. And those are the kind of things that we're going to do. And, but Brian and his team, the things that they've done, I think are absolutely amazing. So, Brian, let me ask you this. I don't know how long we've been on. I don't see the counter here, but it feels like we've been on a while. But this is great. I want folks to be able to hear these things and unpack this and hear it. But like, anything else that you want to cover while we're here? So, I mean, I've asked you a bunch of questions. I've kind of guided us to this point, but like, I do want to give you a chance. If there's anything that you think I've missed or something that you just want to pick up and hit, let me know and we'll cover it.
One other thing I'd like to cover is if we're not reprinting, we're still going to have a need to have basic and mundane abilities on the cards. And we've built in classes and lineages so that when we need to go back and do a very basic ability on a card, spell that says draw 2 cards, it's got a class on it, a subtype on it, so that it really does make a difference whether it goes into deck A or deck B, even though it's a similar ability to the other kind of foundational stuff that we've done before.
Right. Yeah, and that gives us a very wide design space because it's, again, the Wonders Way, folks can read that. It's very clear. We won't reprint cards. It extends to functional reprint. It's got a very small limited supply alt art carve out that's for marketing reasons more than anything else. Everybody can read that on their own. That's strictly on the functional side. And then you have, what you're saying here. It's like that's the line that we've drawn, and we have to be able to make those mundane cards. We understand that. We can't just have a random draw 2 spell that there's only 1,000 of them in existence and we need them in the game in 10 years. And like, we can't have that. We're not, I'm dumb, you're not. So you got it all figured out there. So yeah, just important that people understand those nuances. I hope if they read the Wonders Way that it'll come through really clear of where the line is. And that's, if it's below that line, like you don't need to try to read it and say, could you do this? Could you do that? Could you do this? If it's below the line that we've set, the answer is yes, we can. If the ability is, if it's mechanically different, then we can do it. Doesn't mean that we will do all of them, but we can. What we can't do, we won't reprint the same card. We won't reprint a functional reprint other than just a carve out for 1,000 serialized copies. You can read that. Again, that's a marketing thing, not really a game thing. And then those do have to have alt art, so they are functional. That's the only way that can be done. And then near functionals, we can get really close. Like, that's the way we've drawn it. So just want to make sure everyone understands that, so that we're all clear going in, so that no one complains later and says, well, wow, you got really close to my card here. Well, we did. We felt the need to, and we did. That's how it's designed. But it's not a reprint. It's not a functional reprint. It's got different mechanics. We didn't get to the line. We stayed below it. And if everybody understands that, we'll have a nice, transparent relationship. Anything that you want to add to that, Brian? Do you think I didn't articulate it right, or anything there just that you want to add on, or do you kind of agree with what I said there?
I do agree, but okay. So here's something that I want to tell you about myself.
All right, let's hear it.
I'm a believer in fundamentals. Nothing beats fundamentals. In my other part of my life, I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu teacher. I'm a black belt. I've been in for 19 years. See, his ears all full of cartilage from getting beat up. And I tell my students, nothing beats fundamentals, because if you have very strong fundamentals, you can afford to take risks and do something different and unexpected. Because if you get caught, you'll get out, you'll reset, you won't get stuck. Your fundamentals are strong. And so we took the same approach. I made sure every step of the way that the fundamentals of this game are strong. The gameplay is strong. The cards, the strategies in there, the rules engine, very strong. It is coming out in the playtest feedback that we get. I'm super happy about that. But when you have strong fundamentals, it means you can try weird and different things, and you won't get caught. You won't get stuck. You won't get out of control, because your fundamentals are strong. So the no reprint policy to me is try something different. But it's only possible because the fundamentals of the gameplay and the game design are strong.
I love it. That's really good. I hope the team will crop that for some short form social content, because that was really good, Brian. Anything else? I think we're bumping up on an hour or so. Anything else? I mean, we don't have to cut short. If you got something else you want to cover, let's cover it. We don't get you out because I know you're super busy. You're working with the team. I see your calendar, and like it's kind of crazy the amount of love and passion that is going into this game by those that are building it and those that are trying to tell the world about it and help market it. The team is just, man, wide open right now, and we don't have as much time to get some folks in front of the camera as we would like. Hopefully we'll maybe be able to do a little more of that in between the Kickstarter and stuff shipping. But we definitely want to get enough out for you all to where you understand, who you're going on an adventure with when it comes to the game itself. You're on an adventure with nobody more than Brian himself. He's the one in that seat. He's got a great team around him. Anything else, Brian, that you want to cover before we wrap it up?
I could talk about a lot of things, but one thing that's amazing about this game is the characters and personality, and they're kind of weird and wonderful in a way that you wouldn't typically see from a game publisher. A game publisher has an idea in mind when they go to set out and create characters that support their IP, and they're going to do branding and packaging and merchandise. And all of our characters were created and developed before we ever got there. And just the fact that we kind of did that backwards with the IP and story makes for a game and a storytelling experience within the course of a game have a lot of charm and personality, and it's sometimes a little offbeat, like what's with this card or what's going on here. But to me, it is it's like nothing else that I've seen before, and I love that about it.
That's awesome, man. And I will I'm going to be doing some other stuff. I'm going to get Kish on. We're going to talk more about the IP and the broader world. So we can unpack a lot of that. Why do we have all those characters? Why do we make 5,000 characters? What the heck's going on with that? We'll have to cover all that, but that's a tale for another day right now. And so we'll wrap it up here. Brian, thanks so much for coming out of the game design stuff. I know you literally had to move a game design meeting to carve out a little bit of time to get on with Tony and I today, and we really appreciate it. We'll get this edited and get it out to everyone, and hope you'll all choose to come on board with us. The Kickstarter kicks off on April 30th at 2:00 Eastern time. There will be some early bird bonuses that will be really nice. We're going to make sure that those you'll have information ahead of time. We're not just going to drop the tiers on you. Matter of fact, they're already in Discord. So if you get on our marketing list and all that sort of thing, you can do your due diligence ahead of time so that you can grab those early birds if you're interested in it. We ask that you hop in Discord, follow us on our socials, get on our newsletter lists, all the things to follow along in this wonderful adventure, Wonders of the First. So thanks for everybody for being here, and we'll see you next time.